Welcome to Generally Speaking, the season wrap-up edition. I'm your host, Angelo Fioris. Make sure you follow me on Twitter at NJ_Generals and follow our main account at USFL Today. Also follow us on Twitter, same handle there. Subscribe, set your notifications. Don't miss a single show just like this one. My guest today is Jared SHUSTER of the Pro Football Newsroom. He is a Generals beat writer for those guys over there, and he does a fantastic job. Jared, welcome to the show. How you doing, man?
I'm doing great, Angelo. I mean, I've been watching your show since the beginning of last season. So being on here, it's, kind of a full circle thing. It's cool. It's awesome.
Yeah, it's great to have you. This was your first year kind of on the beat covering the Generals. You did a fantastic job. You really grew as long as the season went along. I liked a lot of the stuff you did, especially the highlighting the statistics, whether it was after a game or player ratings, stuff like that I just don't want to do. So I'm glad someone else was out there to complement my efforts with something a little bit different from what I do. Are you a numbers guy? Is that kind of why you're into that part of the reporting?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big statistical guy. I love analyzing the game. I used to do some stuff like personnel packages, and yeah, I did each week updating the statistical leaders and throughout the game. Numbers help. They don't tell the whole story, but they help tell a bit of what's going on out there.
Yeah, absolutely. And some numbers can be deceiving, as we know, through the course of a football game. But then some numbers are the ones you can always rely on that really do tell the story, like a time of possession and turnovers, for example, right? Which leads us to our wrap-up show. Unfortunately, the playoffs are this Saturday, and the Generals will not be part of that. So it's our job now to kind of rehash what went down over the course of the last 10 weeks and try to figure out, A, what went wrong, B, what went right, and C, what needs to be done for 2024 to be a much better season than, statistically, at least by winning percentage, the Generals' all-time worst season in their history, even worse than 1983, which was really bad. So that doesn't say much. Let's talk overall, Jared, since that's where I'm leading off with here. There was a lot of high hopes for this team based on the fact that they retained 75% of the roster. They tried to retain some semblance of a Cavante Turpin-like player by adding Warren Newman, who has a similar stature and skill set, and they retooled the defense a little bit, including maybe elevating some guys that were on the team from a year ago. Season started off the same way as last year, a tough loss in Birmingham to kick off the season. But I thought there were some good things in that game that we saw, which were going to then just be refined and lead to the team finding themselves and being competitive all year. But that didn't happen, did it, Jared?
No, and I mean, that was probably, I feel like week one was probably the low point for the defense. They kind of only improved from there. I mean, they had other games where, like the Stars game, they gave up more points. But aside from the Stars game, that was the highest point total they allowed.
Right.
And a lot of the other scores against them were, like you said, the turnovers. The offense puts them in a bad spot. And a lot of times they held them to field goals. I mean, I was really, outside of week one, I was really impressed with the defense. And outside of the fourth quarter of the Stars game, that was a little scary, but
got a little hairy. Yeah, it got a little hairy there at the end. But talking about the overall picture of the team, it was really the offense that came up short when you compare the performances from a year ago. The defense was improved from a year ago. We might as well start with the defense since we're talking about that. A year ago, they could only muster up, I think it was 10 sacks as a team, with Toby Johnson's 2 leading the way. And this year that changed completely. Coach Dez, first of all, if you talk to every one of those defensive linemen and the guys that are racking up the sacks this year, they credit Coach Dez big time for bringing his technique and his enthusiasm to what they were doing. And it showed. The players believed in him, and it responded. They responded. You got guys like Hercules, who had, I think, 6 sacks, and Tyshawn Render, who had 3.5 or 4 sacks. Unfortunately, was down with an injury the last couple of years. Toby Johnson had 4 sacks, doubling his output from a year ago. And then you got, talk about the defensive backs. They had a pretty good season too, I thought, Jared.
Yeah, and that was an area of the team I was kind of concerned about. They lost DeJuan Neal and who's on the other side? I'm blanking on his name right now, but DJ Daniel came in and he was fantastic, and I was really pleased with that. And like you were alluding to with the pass rush, Hercules, like you said, had 6 sacks. Tyshawn Render missed half the year, and he had 4.5.
Right.
And it's just, I mean, and Toby, like you said, had 4, and he's fantastic in the run game. So I mean, there wasn't really much to be upset about. I mean, especially when they're on the field for sometimes 40 minutes. It's tough. I mean, and they're the special teams putting them in bad positions. Like we said, the turnovers. I mean, they're short fields that they're
That's
defending.
right.
They held up real well, especially in the red zone.
Absolutely. And let's not forget the linebackers who were all over the place this season. Chris Orr had a dominant season and he missed a couple of games and still had 82 tackles. You talk about DeJuan Hines, who's just a tackling machine. He was last year and he was again this year. I mean, talk about steady Eddie. Those guys were excellent. And then for me, the real unsung hero who showed a lot to me on the defense, who had a fantastic year, a couple of mistakes, including a drop that he wishes he would have back, is Paris Ford. He stepped it up. He was not a starter before the season began, but he worked his way into the starting lineup by just being really keen with the tackling, and his coverage has been great. And he didn't have many penalties, more emotional penalties called against Paris Ford than technical penalties or interference type things. So I really feel like a lot of these guys that emerge, especially in the defensive backfield, combined with the veterans we already know that can perform, this defense is set up to do with some tweaks, similar type of damage as they did this year. I'm not worried about the defense heading into next season, Jared.
Yeah, and I wrote this up in my recap following the Generals Maulers game.
Where can we read that recap? Plug that.
That's on well, you can find it on my Twitter, or yeah, you can go on USFL Newsroom. It'll be on there. So all my articles are on there. But yeah, I really spoke to that. Basically with the defense, I just hope they can pick up a couple depth pieces, whether it be in the rookie draft or in free agency, and just kind of keep that core together. Because like you said, the linebackers, Hines and Orr, fantastic. They have, in my opinion, the deepest and best overall safety room in the league. I think, maybe add a piece to corner. I like Nugget from Jackson State. He got activated in the final week, and I think he could be a solid contributor next year. And like you said, the pass rush was they were second in the league in sacks. I mean, that's
big difference from the last.
Yeah. So I mean, they just need to add depth, and if they can keep that core together, I'm not concerned about the defense.
I'm not sure if they led the league in batted passes, but they were pretty close to the top as well. I haven't seen that actual final figure, but they were batting down 5-6 passes a week there, especially somewhere between weeks 2 and like 7, when things were going really well for the defense. They didn't give up a lot of points. Stars game aside, that all happened pretty much in the fourth quarter where they gave up those 17 points, including the real quick TD. But overall, they did enough on a weekly basis from a points allowed standpoint, Jared, to give this offense a chance to win almost every one of those games. All of those points totals that they needed to achieve were all manageable and doable. But switching back to offense now, the problem was too many turnovers. The problem was too many 3 and outs. And the problem was no sustained drives. And like you alluded to, time of possession was a strength a year ago, was one of their biggest weaknesses. There was a point I was at the Memphis game, was at week 7. I was at the Showboats game, and there was a point during the second half where I looked up at the scoreboard, and the time of possession was like 33-9. Yeah. 33-9, and they were only trailing by like 5 points.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it seemed like every game was like that this year, Jared.
Yeah, I mean, especially that Memphis game, I want to say it was 40-20 was the time of possession. And, the defense gave up, 25 points? It was a 1-score game. I mean,
yeah,
and like you said, that was a strength last year. That's something I feel like we didn't see. Like you said, the 3 and outs. I mean, especially in the USFL with the running clock,
that's right.
You give up a 7-minute drive, even if you only allow a field goal, your offense goes 3 and out. And I mean, they could run out the quarter. That's 15 minutes 2 minutes of time of possession. It's unsustainable.
That pretty much happened in that Memphis game. As a matter of fact, I forget which quarter it was. It might have been the second quarter, might have been the third quarter, actually. Right when I looked up at the clock and things were getting out of hand from a time of possession standpoint, and it was not a good look all season long. They were not able to convert. It also felt like, as we switch for a moment, because they go hand in hand, to the coaching aspect. A lot of times the play calling left me scratching my head on 3rd and 2s, on 4th and 2s. It seemed like they weren't calling the kind of plays really geared towards the team's strength. How many times were they in an and short situation, Jared, where they call a pass play from the shotgun, for example, with no one in the backfield? And we saw it too many times this year, no matter who the quarterback was, whether it was DeAndre Johnson or Kyle Lauletta or even Prukop for that little bit of playing time he got this year.
Yeah, and it's part of it, I think, is, like having a weapon like Cavante. A lot of times on a 3rd and 2, for example, they run him on a jet sweep motion. You give it to Victor up the gut. That's going to take the eyes of the defense. I mean, and not that they have great guys. Like, I'm a big fan of Warren Newman. It was a shame that he was hurt for so much of the year.
Right.
And he brings some of that, but as we've seen, Cavante Turpin is like, he's a different animal. That's why he was an all-pro. So
special, right?
That's part of it. But like you said, and we talked about, I mean, the play calling, it left me scratching my head at times. It was, you got to lean on your strength. And I'm a passing guy. I love throwing the ball, but
sure.
when you got dogs like that, like Trey Williams and Darius Victor, and even Kingston Davis looked good in some spurts. It's questionable.
They weren't running enough when it was working for them. It was strange. Like, they would have a few runs. They would seem to be looking to establish the run, and then they would go away from it inexplicably and then try to get it back. And then, like, after only a play or two of trying to get it back, they're like, let's just throw the ball some more. And then that's what was happening, it felt like. And I don't know if it was a lack of confidence in the offensive line. It can't possibly be, because those guys were great. We'll talk about the Terry Poole situation in a second. And I don't think it was a lack of confidence in the running backs. I mean, Darius Victor still was up there in the league leaders, among the league leaders in rushing. He still scored 4 touchdowns on the ground, down from last year's 9, but they were down across the board in scoring. And not having that 1-2 punch of him and Trey Williams intact all year definitely hurt the team as well. I don't want to speak on what was going on with the Trey Williams situation. That might be for another show. But there was certainly something happening there that was preventing him from playing. And when we did see the two of them together, it seemed to work. Like in the Stars game, Trey was awesome. He's always awesome. He's a Riley guy. He played for Coach Riley at 2 other teams before this. So not having him in there was a big loss to the offense. It was like they didn't have Cavante Turpin and they didn't have Trey Williams this year.
Right. Yeah. And yeah, I was a proponent all season. I was calling for Darius Victor to get the ball more. I know there's less plays in the USFL, like we said, because of the running clock, but I think it was 4 or 5 out of the games out of the 10, he was under double-digit carries. I mean, that hurts me. I feel like he should really be carrying the load for that team. He finished the season with 100 rushes, so he's averaging 10 a game. That's I thought he should have been near that 150 mark at least.
Right. He was getting far too few carries a week. Against Memphis, they only ran the ball 15 times. That's never going to cut it in any league, not even Pop Warner. And they just did not play to their strengths. They did not. Last year there was a point in game 1 they ran the ball 24 times in a row. I think it was against Birmingham on inaugural night. And that's pretty much set the tone for what this team was going to be. We never saw any of that. They never really came close. Only, again, we keep talking about it because it was their one shining moment. Only in the Stars game did the Generals really look like the Generals. The receivers, I thought, listen, DeAndre's not the most accurate passer. We saw several occasions where he missed receivers, whether they were open and he didn't throw the ball to them, or whether he did throw the ball to them and the accuracy wasn't there. It's not the strongest part of his game, but he also wasn't put in that position. Last year, he threw for such a high accuracy, but that was because of those high percentage passes that he was able to get rid of the ball when defenses were in that, that zone where they don't know what he's going to do. They weren't putting him in those spots this year, Jared.
No, yeah. And speaking on the receiving core, I like the receivers they have a lot. I mean, Alonzo Moore was great. Cam is awesome.
Yep.
Warren Newman. You know, they have. I guess I'll go to my fandom for a second. I'm a big Giants guy. It's like they have all these twos and threes, and I really would like to see them, get a real number one, someone that it's third and medium, third and long, like that. That's he could win a one-on-one matchup. You see that with Corey Coleman, and even like with several of these teams. They Joe Walker's a name.
Joe Walker, right? I was going to say he's one.
There
Hyman,
are guys that
another
they
guy like that.
to win, and that's something I saw a lot. There wasn't a lot of separation, and when you don't have the most accurate quarterback, it's you can't always hit those tight windows. It's tough.
It's funny you said Coleman, because last night during the Panthers Stars game, there was a couple of plays where when they needed that first down, Cook has hit Coleman kind of over the middle on those crossing patterns. And I actually said out loud, that's what the Generals don't do at all.
Right.
Exactly. They didn't do it. You never saw it this year. And they do have nice receivers. Alonzo Moore is great. He did end up leading the league in touchdown receptions. I believe his 5 was tops in the league, but he can't do it by himself. And he took a lot of punishment as well, because he's the only guy that represents that real, big and deep target for them. I thought Darrell Stewart showed some flashes when he was in there. He's a very emotional player, though. He's gonna be a good one, but he's very emotional. I like him, though. He's funny too. Excuse me. He was messing with me on the sidelines one day when I was out there, pretending he was somebody else because he wasn't in uniform. And I was like trying to figure out who he was. And he was telling me he was, oh no, I'm Arthur Jackson. And I'm like, no, you ain't. I know what Arthur Jackson looks like. So he's a little bit of a clown too. I like Darrell Stewart. I like Arthur Jackson as well. We didn't see enough of that kid. Number 23, that boy, that game tying 3-pointer fell right off of his hands at the end of that game. And of course, he couldn't hang on. But the Generals do need another receiver. They didn't really replace Darius Shepard. And so not having that complimentary guy, or Alonzo being the complimentary guy to somebody else like that, definitely was just made them that much more predictable and easier to cover and defend, Jared.
No, yeah, no doubt. I mean, it's kind of Darius Shepard, although, Turpin was the one. Darius Shepard was kind of that guy on you need a gotta have it play, and they, Perez or DeAndre looked his way, and it was, it's hard, especially in the way that football has gone over the years. It's hard when you don't have that go-to guy to pick those up.
Yeah, when you lack that standout player that people have to truly game plan for.
Yeah,
it makes it much more difficult in those key situations, and the Generals definitely lack that. Something else, Jared, that bothered me a lot about this team, and they did it last year too. They just managed to get away with it much more often, was the maddening penalties. They started the game off with a penalty on Saturday before any time had lapsed off the clock. Their very first play was a false start with 14:57 remaining in the first quarter. And my first words out of my mouth were, oh, is that going to be the harbinger of things to come? And it was.
Yeah, no, and like that's something I felt like a broken record, because every week when I'm writing, my previews, I'm saying you got to avoid the dumb penalties. You have to avoid the turnovers. And it just felt like week in and week out, I'm writing the recap saying, they played well, but they shot themselves in the foot with the dumb turnovers and the dumb penalties. I mean, just one, for example, that comes to mind. I can't remember the game. It might have been the Stars game. They, to avoid a delay game, they called a timeout. And coming out of the timeout, they got to delay a game.
That's right.
That's not the type of thing. You can't. You're just putting yourselves behind the sticks, especially when you're a running team. First and 15, they know you're going to have to throw the ball probably twice.
Right. You put the team behind the 8 ball, and there was a lot of those. They made a lot of mistakes at key plays that did help extend drives at times and cost them some games. It's hard for me to catalog all of them right now because, frankly, they've blended.
Yeah.
They really have blended from week 1 right through week 10. I think they had one game where they committed one penalty for 5 yards somewhere around. It might have been the Stars game, actually, where they played, obviously their best game. Other than that, it was 11 penalties, 9 penalties, 8 penalties. And the worst part is, yeah, I mean, no penalty is opportune, right? Sometimes there's a good penalty, sometimes, to take one. But it seemed like every time the Generals committed a penalty was right after a big third down stop and it kept the drive going, or it was and early in the game. I believe, as a matter of fact, one that really stands out to me was in a 2-week period, they had 4 ineligible man downfields called against them.
Yeah.
All right. Each of them wiping out a big play. One wiped out a 30-yard pass on the opening drive against the Gamblers, which had the Generals deep into Gamblers territory early in a winnable game, which they ended up losing by 6. That got called back, and that drive ended up being nothing. There was another one later in the next week with a 3-point conversion, which they actually converted, and that got called back for an ineligible man downfield. So that's 2 plays right there. And there was another one which wiped out a touchdown and another one which wiped out another big gain. So the Generals, between penalties and the turnovers, Jared, you could total up all those yardage, the free yardage they gave away, and you could probably put up another 3 football fields.
Yeah, and the ineligible men downfield, part of me understood. They run a lot of RPOs. It's you got to get the ball out quick or you got to hand it off. So I don't totally put that on the linemen. It's tough, but like you said, inopportune. Last week in week 10, against Pittsburgh, they pin them deep on a nice Brock Miller punt. They get the 3 and out, and then they're going to be set up probably deep in Mahler's territory off the punt, and they rough the punter and extend.
Unbelievable.
And it wastes that's 8 minutes that your defense is on the field.
Right. Right. They ended up not losing anything from that bad penalty other than time and yardage and field position. But because Pittsburgh was actually able to drive out of that hole a little bit and then eventually did punt the ball back, and the Generals, I believe, started that ensuing drive from their 20. So they lost probably 50 yards in that exchange and about 6 minutes. And that kind of stuff happened on a week in, week out basis, almost at least once a game.
Yeah, it's like I said, as a fan, it's frustrating, and I hated hammering home the same points, but it was almost we were watching the same game every week. It was
eerie how that was. And there was a stage during the season, around week 7 again, or 8 on the pregame show. And I said, I'm going to sound like a broken record here. I actually use those words because I feel like I was doing a lot of times the same show weekly. And it was getting frustrating from my standpoint because I didn't have anything else to talk about. It was the same thing. Stop turning the ball over. Stop committing bad penalties. Get creative with the play calling. The one night they did that, they scored 37 points.
Yeah, like you said, that was the one time they looked like the 9-1 Generals.
Yeah. They lulled us into thinking they were going to show up on Saturday, and they just did not. 19-6 felt like 199-6, Jared, at that point.
And I mean, the box score was relatively close thanks to that garbage time drive at the end. But in actuality, they only had about 150 yards of offense. They again lost over the turnover battle, and again, just a lot of procedural penalties. I think 4 false starts, 2 delay of games. I can deal with, I think it might have been week 2. I don't want to be mistaken, but I think it was Christian Tutt made a nice hit on, I believe, Joshua Simmons, and he kind of stood over him and got a 15-yarder. I can deal with that because
I was there. That's right.
Yeah, I like the emotion, but the procedural things, like not getting the plays in, it felt like, the plays are coming in real late.
Yep.
DeAndre's not able to look over the defense, things like that. It's frustrating.
I wonder how much of that is preparation, coaching. When I speak with the guys, it's always about a good week of practice. Everybody's up, everybody's into it, everyone's locked in. And I have no reason to doubt that. But when it happens week in and week out, you've got to wonder where the disconnect is, that this is the same sorts of things. And I've asked Coach about it several times over the last couple of seasons now about the penalties. And I've never really gotten a good answer as to why they continue to commit them at such a prodigious rate. But this has to stop for next year for them to have any success in doing the things that they couldn't do this year, like continuing drives, like ending opponents' drives and keeping possession. So, speaking about special teams for the Generals, that was a mixed bag too. Let's start with the good. The good was the kicking. Last year, a giant hole in their game. It's weird. The two big holes in their game at the end of the season last year, I said the Generals need to improve their kicking and they need to find a pass rush. They did both of those things and they won 6 fewer games. I just don't understand how that happened. Nick Skiba was excellent. He was a calming presence as far as kicking the ball after the anxiety that the triumvirate of whiffs last season between the three guys. Nick Skiba missed only one kick, I think, and it was a long one and only one extra point, which actually loomed large at the end of that Stars game and scared the crap out of me for a little while. But they did a great job. The long snapper, Jordan Ober, was excellent all season long. I can't think of really a high snap or a low snap or a rolling snap out of him. And Brock Miller, what can you say about Brock Miller? The guy's a pro. He's in the wrong league.
Yeah, and I think I tweeted something about that, and you said that exact thing, that he's better than half the guys in the NFL. I mean, he's consistent,
at least
huge leg. He can pin them deep. I mean, he's got touch and everything, and
he's a lefty.
Yeah, which is huge.
Yeah,
just their big hole, I think, on special teams was just the coverage was especially
Poor.
it was. Especially against the Stars. I mean, every possession starting on the 50. It's how much can you ask of your defense? And I liked Cam was even better last season. I liked what he did this year, returning the ball, but for whatever reason, they couldn't set up blocks the same way. He was consistently getting out with a closer kickoff. He was getting out to the 40 every time. And this season seemed like they're starting at the 20 or the 30.
That's right, Jared.
Hit once he catches it.
That's right, Jared. Last year, Cam was consistently getting the Generals to the 38, 42-yard line, starting position at midfield quite a bit last year, and they had shorter fields to work with. This year, you're right. They were constantly on their 20, their 25-yard line. Cam was staring at coverage guys in his face the minute he tried to turn upfield. I don't know if it was the blocking scheme. I know it's not Cam's ability. He didn't get slower in the offseason, and he certainly didn't forget how to return kicks. He did have a bigger role on the offense this year compared to last year, but I do not believe that had any effect on it. I really believe that either the scheme was predictable and teams were able to just break through whatever they had set up, or maybe special teams coaching.
Yeah, I mean,
could be lacking. They weren't gaining yards and they weren't stopping teams either. Like Generals' starting average field position compared to their opponents, I don't know the number, Jared, but I bet you there's easily an 18-yard disparity between the two on average.
Oh, there has to be. I mean, I think Coach Riley said in a press conference that, they scored a touchdown at one point and he was like, "Oh gosh, we have to go kick off now." I mean, that's right. How I felt every time. I'm like, they didn't let a lot, I don't think they gave up a kickoff touchdown. I think the one they did was called back, but it was consistently, 35 at worst, upwards of like we said, midfield, their side of the field, one first down, your
field goal range.
Yeah, exactly.
And the Stars did that to them at the end of the first game when it was 21-all, and it looked like we might be going to overtime, but they failed on the kick coverage. And one play later, they were close enough for Aguiar to hit a 56-yarder. And that's all that it took to lose that game. And there were so many times that they did not cover well. They did not tackle well on those kickoff coverages. And a lot of times that was in a league like this, that's a big difference maker. Those extra yards. So, and with the running clock and all these other things, it's a different mix of factors that win and lose a USFL game. Even though it's still football, it's a little bit different. The Generals just fell short all around. From a coaching standpoint, we talked about special teams. And I'm not trying to call out coaches here. I'm just wondering aloud, is coaching part of the factor that special teams was so poor? Play calling. We already talked about, they seemed a little stale in the play calling this season. No creativity until week 9. And when we saw it and they were successful. Jared, you said to me, about 3 weeks ago, you felt like, because it's kind of an area of expertise for you, you felt like you were noticing a lot of the same schemes, a lot of the same type of plays being called, and kind of from a limited batch of plays as well.
Yeah, and I mean, it's really a fall from grace. I mean, just coach of the year, obviously last year, Mike Riley, and it seemed like it was the same scheme, the exact, they didn't install any new things. And you would think with about 75% of the roster back, that gives you a head start on, installing new stuff. You guys already know the baseline of the playbook. But I watched a couple of games from last season. I do think, I know I keep harping on this, but Kevontae Turpin got him out of a lot of sticky situations.
Oh yeah.
Him on one of those 2-yard drag routes, and he's faster than everyone. He'd beat him to the corner and he'd pick up 20, 25 yards. I mean, when you aren't able to do that, it puts you in a rough position. You gotta do a lot more drop back passing, gotta hit the seams, which is, something they didn't do that well. They didn't attack outside the numbers as much as I wanted to.
Right.
So, it's like we said, we don't want to keep harping on Riley and the coaching staff, but it left something to be desired, that's for sure.
It did. It seemed like, now let's get into some of like the non-tangible things, the stuff we can't see, right? It felt like a year ago, Jared, this was the most together bunch in the league. They really fought for one another. They ran through walls for coach. This year, you don't question the effort. I feel like the guys were playing hard every week and they prepared hard every week, but they didn't seem like they had the same vibe around them, the same bounce, the same locker room camaraderie that you just couldn't help but sense and feel from a year ago. Now, I don't know if it's a lack of success that kind of brings things down or what, but it just was not a duplication of last year at all, and on any level, in any stage of their game.
Yeah, and I mean, that's something we talked about prior to the show. Like teams like the Maulers and the Panthers, they struggled last year. They were down, but they never were out. And it's easier for a team that is kind of, I wouldn't say used to losing, but has had less success to, feel like they can turn it around. Whereas the Generals, by week 4 had lost more regular season games than they did all of last season. So, when you're so used to that type of success and winning the close games, it's guys can start to,
check out.
Yeah, just a little bit. They're giving their all, but it's a little subconscious thing going on, and that's not easy to overcome.
So now you're not wrong about that. Looking ahead to next year now, we already touched upon it with the defense, the defensive backfield, couple tweaks back there. And I think they have a lot of other pieces in place that allow this defense to kind of pick up where it left off. But boy, from an offensive standpoint, Jared, they've got a lot of decisions to make. Like, who do they really want to be? Number one. How does Eric Barrier fit into this for the future next year? Is it going to be a Barrier versus Johnson? God forbid we see a Barrier and Johnson next year. I don't think I could take anything like that again. I really want them to kind of decide what sort of offense they are and just pick a quarterback to run it and be that team.
Yeah, and I mean, anyone that follows me knows I'm a big DeAndre guy. I thought from the jump it should have been his team. I mean, he got injured. The one time he could have came back. The second time was obviously a very scary situation. I was glad he was able to come back so quickly and he was doing well.
Right.
But I thought it should have been his team. I mean, I always felt like it took him a quarter or two to get back into rhythm, and then he seemed like he was on point. So that's definitely a big thing. And I don't know the situation I know a lot of guys have the 2-year contracts, so I don't know exactly what's, who's going to be returning, who isn't. There's, of course, the other league. So, what guys are going to.
You could say XFL on my show. I don't mind.
No, I don't think I want. I don't totally want to say XFL. No, I'm kidding. But no, it's a lot of question marks. Like we said, the defense, just bring depth and build on what they have, but the offense, it's a lot of question marks. Like you said, I'm not sure what direction they're going to go in, but I just want one quarterback. That's really what I'm hoping for.
I'm with you on that. And listen, out of the two, I was a DeAndre guy last year as well, and it's not a commentary on Lewis's season. He had a great season last year, and I'm happy that he won a championship this year. So, but I felt like it should have been DeAndre's team as well. And they kind of made it his team. Coach Riley said it was his team, and then the very next game, it wasn't his team, and it didn't become his team again until after the Memphis game, I guess it was, and that was just too late. And you also wonder, Jared, how much did that take out of the locker room from a morale standpoint when, listen, we all can see what we see. The best guy for the job wasn't under center for 100% of the snaps when he was healthy. So I wonder how much does that affect the team when they see the same things we see and a lot more of it.
Yeah, no, like you said, they see the same things times 10. I mean, they're in the locker rooms, they're at practice. They know all the inside going ons, and so I can only imagine. I'm sure you have a little more insight to that. You have a good relationship with a lot of guys, and yeah, that's a tough situation. That's the way you could lose guys. They want the best chance to win. I understand getting guys film and giving guys a shot, but at the same time, you're here to win. That's the whole point of this.
Yeah, and this team had high expectations going in. Several of the players that I spoke to in the offseason were making some pretty bold predictions. And that was, and I'm not downgrading them for having that kind of confidence in the team, but it just seems like things got out of control beyond anybody's reach to reel them back in. And it happened pretty quickly. And I feel like that's a story that we're going to learn a little bit more about as this offseason begins to unfold starting July 2nd.
Yeah, it'll certainly be interesting to kind of hear all that stuff, and I do have the confidence in the core guys they have, especially on the defense. I do think they could hold it together and build on it. And I personally, maybe I'm a little biased, but I don't see a season like I think it'll be closer to year one than year two next season.
I'm not going to say that I don't think that could happen. Of course, it could. But this league has proven that it's very unpredictable. That's for sure, because we have no idea who some of the new guys are going to be on these teams, right? Whether they're going to sign someone they may have drafted back in February. Like, I'm curious, are the Generals going to be able to dip into some of those guys that they got the rights to come once NFL camps get settled and everybody gets cut on that last day of NFL camp? Who will be available? Like, will that kid they drafted at QB, Martinez, will he be available? Will he be in camp? I'd like to see him in camp and bring his style into the competition. So a lot of those things that we couldn't possibly know what's going to happen, because I don't think even the GMs and the coaches know yet what's going to happen or who they're honed in on. But don't forget, last year, almost as soon as the season ended, the signings all began. The Generals started first, and there's some speculation as to whether they were supposed to make all those signings, but that's a dead issue now. So I expect things to start again fast and furious across the entirety of the league this year once the season ends, Jared. So it's going to be interesting. There's no off season, is there?
No, I mean, I'm excited. It's a long stretch of without actual games, but there'll certainly be stories to follow and pickups, like you said. So definitely looking forward to all that coming down the way.
Who you like in the playoff games this week? Not a huge long prediction, just a gut feeling.
The way the Maulers played, I mean, I said this a couple days ago to I forget who I said it to, but I said I don't care who wins the Panther Stars game, I'm picking the Maulers. And then I've said it all year, the Stallions, in my opinion, they got the best quarterback and they got the best team. Despite all the injuries, they have one of the best rosters. So I'm pretty confident in that. So I guess we might see a Maulers Stallions championship. That's going to be interesting.
I'll tell you what, man, when they linked up during the regular season, I was there for that game. That was an excellent game. And the Maulers had them on the ropes until that late kickoff return. And a couple of fewer mistakes by the Maulers, and they win that game. I mean, it felt like they were going to pull that out for a little bit. So I would not discount Pittsburgh in any situation now, simply because of that defense and simply because offensively they're at least serviceable now. Whereas in the first 3-4 weeks of the season, especially, they weren't. Once the Stallions game rolled around, they seemed to at least find a little bit of footing offensively, even though they don't really light it up.
Right. Yeah. No,
Yeah.
I really like Troy Williams in there at quarterback.
Me too.
He adds a real good element. He throws a nice ball, and they don't have the best protection from that offensive line, so he's
No.
able to make things happen with his legs. I mean, we saw that against the Generals. He was the leading rusher,
Yeah.
and so no,
He was the team's leading rusher too, leading rusher, leading touchdown scorer on the ground, leading passer. I mean, they need him. They rely on that guy, and he's going to have a great game on Saturday too. I really feel that. And on the other side, I feel like Birmingham's probably the best team, like you said. Although New Orleans seems to have found a stride defensively, especially in the last 3 weeks, Jared. And so I like the way they're flying around and with their coverage. Their D-backs have been playing great. Their linebackers have been beastly over the last few weeks. So I like the Breakers defense more now than I like their offense in the first 4 games of the season. So it's interesting to see how they sort of evolved and morphed into a different kind of team, more of a playoff team, really, when you think about it, heading into the playoffs, defense and grind it out. So it's going to be interesting, but I'm with you. I'm pulling for Michigan simply because there's a couple guys on that team that I get along with, and I like them a lot. They've been gracious to me during the season. Not to say the Maulers players have not. Boogie Roberts has been great this year to me. He's been on the show a few times. Troy Williams has been a guest. In fact, he'll be a guest on the pregame show this week when we do our playoff preview show on the radio. So it's hard for me to pick and go against anybody because there are great guys on every team, and you want to see all of them ultimately do well for themselves. So no matter what, the fans win out. We're going to get a couple of great games this weekend. The records don't matter. All the teams are 0-0 now, Jared.
Oh no, that was my next point I was going to make, is that I'm not totally confident on the picks, but I have to look at the betting lines. I do a little gambling, but the one thing I'm sure of is they're going to be good games, and I'm really looking forward to that. So
yeah, Saturday night and Sunday night, both of them on network TV. One's on NBC, one's on Fox. It should be a couple of great games, both in different sites. That should be wild. Birmingham should have a great crowd. Simply because it's their first home playoff game since the 80s. And I'm really curious what kind of crowd is going to show up in Canton for a single game playoff situation between Maulers and Michigan. I mean, last year there was 2 playoff games in Canton, and the crowd was maybe like 7,000 at the peak for the playoffs, but there was also 2 games to lure people and to get people to stick around. So I wonder if one playoff game and a year's worth of growth is enough to at least match last year's crowd, or will it still be a little bit muted? I figure they'll get to around 5,000 or 6,000 people at least.
Yeah, I mean, I'm hoping some people make the trip out from Pittsburgh. It's the closest team, so I guess it kind of worked out for the league that they have the Maulers playing. So
right.
I'm pretty optimistic that they could hit that 7K number.
That would be a solid figure. The championship game will do great. They were a near sellout last year, and it will be this year as well. I really do believe that too. There's no way that it won't be. So that puts a wrap on the Generals' very disappointing 2023. They lost as many games this year as they did in all of 1985 when they played 18 games and still only lost 7. So this statistically was the worst Generals season in their history. And hopefully things can only go up from here. Jared, this was a great regular season. We will definitely be doing this again as things develop during the off season. We'll probably get a show or 2 in over the winter for sure, man. But again, great job this year out of you with your work at Pro Football Newsroom. Your writing's awesome. Your insight is excellent, and you'll build up those contacts with the team. It'll come with time. Just keep reaching out to guys. They're all pretty cool.
All right. Yeah, I really appreciate it. And you've been a big help. You've steered me in the right direction, given me what I needed. We share information. So
sure.
Yeah. So you've always been a huge help. So I really appreciate you having me on and for everything this season.
It was like I said, it was great to look around and see another actual Generals account offering insight, because I was literally the only guy doing General stuff last year. So now it's you and me. And I think Angela from Defiant Takes, she does a little bit of general stuff as well. She's really talented and good too. So at least there's a couple of us now. And when they get this team in Jersey eventually, and we're all in the press conference room together, we'll be the OGs. You know what I mean?
Yeah, there you go. I'm hoping it's next season. I cannot wait for that. I don't care where it is in Jersey. Just get them in the area, and I'll be there.
Absolutely. Jared Schuster of the Pro Football Newsroom. What is your Twitter handle?
J Schuster, USFL is the.
There you go. Just type in Jared Schuster in your search box. You'll find him there. That wraps it up for this week's edition of Generally Speaking, the very sad post-mortem on the 2023 season. We will definitely be doing these shows as the off season moves on. I'll be getting guests. I'll be getting players to talk to. We got to give them a few weeks to to decompress and get this season out of their system and clear their heads. And then they'll start coming back on again, much like they did last year. And I'm looking forward to an off season of a lot of rebuilding. Hopefully we get the general manager on this year too in the off season. That'd be great.
Yeah, no doubt. I really appreciate it all. Thank you so much.
Jared, thanks for joining us, everybody. Thanks for watching. Remember, USFL Today. Subscribe on YouTube. Set your notifications. Don't miss a show. Follow me on Twitter at NJ_Generals and follow our other account at USFL Today. Enjoy the playoffs, everybody. Remember, we got game plan coming on Friday. Me and Luke Miller will break down the 2 playoff matches in depth. Thanks for watching, everybody.